Hey everyone, Mike on Monday coming to you. So last week we had an opportunity to do a little training with our folks at Winfield, and one of the speakers on the training was Dr. Shaun Casteel out of Purdue. His topic was on soybeans, and uh, if you folks know me, I follow Fred Below quite a bit out of Illinois and trying to put all these parts and pieces together on how do we improve our yields and such with the economics of today, etc. So I'm just going to hit a couple of his highlights, Dr. Shaun, on his thoughts on some soybeans and how to maybe improve production through various practices. So we know that variety selection is somewhere between 6 and 12 bushel swing. That is pretty well documented. So making sure that you're working with some of the better genetics out there is one of the pieces of the puzzles. His side of it, or down in, again, he's in Indiana. They see about a 5 to 10% increase in yield in 15-inch rows over 30-inch rows. Plant stands, he's shooting for that 100 to 160,000. Now remember, they get a little warmer than we do up in our location here, so a little sooner. So you got to take a number of these things into account, plus the soil types that they're working with. A lot of their stuff is probably 3.5% organic matter and higher. So again, we have to calibrate for what's happening in northeast Wisconsin. One of the things that he did point out, and most of us have heard this or experienced it, that planting time can give us a 4 to 8 bushel bump. So the earlier we can plant, the more yield that plant can set up for. He talked about, though, you needed to have solid foundations, access to plant nutrition. As an example, if you get out there and work some ground early and you put in a density layer or a compaction layer that inhibits that plant to go deeper, we may accidentally cut off access to some of those nutrients. If we go dry, think of if you understand how potassium gets into any plant, it's called mass flows. So we need water to make that happen. So anything that stalls the water, limits the water, will slow down the ability for that plant to get potassium into it itself. He talked about thinking of heat accumulation and light interception. So the earlier we get started on those things, the more of those pieces of heat and light that we intercept. Those things tend to lead to more nodes. More nodes leads to more pods, more reproductive branches, more canopy closure, and all of these things you have more of that occur during the days of reproduction. So all those little bits and pieces continue to add up. Again, he found that as they got later planting, now down by them mid-May tends to get pretty late, but anything after mid-May is 0.3 to 0.4 bushels a day end up getting lost. So in his mind, and here's a new one for me at least, you want to have the field green to the eye by 4th of July. That's a new way of saying canopy closure. So again, trying to get all that light intercepted as early as we can to set up the stage for a good yield. And he continued to reflect on the point of this isn't something that you can do all of a sudden at the end when you hit the flowering repro stage of now I'm going to start thinking about maybe doing something about this crop. He emphasized that you had to continually lead up to it, making good decisions as you're moving forward. Most of us will agree that the month of August tends to be a month that really impacts the yield of that bean. So we've said by many of us that you got to get some rain in August if you want your soybeans to yield, and that is true. He did point out that it isn't just that August, it might be a period slightly before and then again after, again managing up front the duration of that reproductive stage. And he really started hitting on this point, which was sulfur, the need for sulfur in soybeans. Now, I guess I'll be happy to say that I've been around folks that pointed me down the sulfur path many years ago. But here's some more points. If you're going to get into that early planting of soybeans, you must remember what's going on in that soil. Very low, slow biology, so we're getting a slower release of some of the nitrogen, some of the sulfur that's locked up in the organic matter. Well, that plant needs it early. So one of his research pieces did show that early nitrogen and sulfur applications, basically he's putting it on pre-emerge, so right after planting, he was getting anywhere from 8 to 12 bushel increases. Now we need to know that, or work with what sources are we using of those products that are available for that plant at the beginning and through the duration of that. But sulfur is a cofactor in the nitrogen fixation process. More so than we've known before, the amount of sulfur that we continue to need and bring to that crop isn't necessarily getting higher. It's just that the air continues to get cleaner, so we have to manage that sulfur part of it. So the plant needs it, the rhizobia need it, and sulfur is a huge part of the puzzle of making your nutrients and the usage of those nutrients very effective within the plant. So his information, as he pointed out, as he improved his sulfur performance in the plant, and he talked about using tissue tests and checking, what's the balance of nitrogen to sulfur ratio, that when he was getting it correct, his seed size grew from 3,000 seeds per pound to 2,700 seeds per pound. So we got a bigger seed. Not that we get paid for it currently, but he did see protein would increase in this scenario. In his studies, 37% was kind of the base, and then it moved up to about 39% on a dry matter basis. Again, so if you're looking at utilizing early planting for soybeans, which I know a number of us did last year when it was so cold and we didn't want to plant corn, it was a great way to jump into it. Use the better seed treatments to help us with those cold conditions, to try and get that plant up and out of the ground as quickly as we can, to start taking advantage of heat accumulation and light interception, so that we're building those branches on that plant sooner, so that we're building a yield where our need for nitrogen and sulfur is different with those early plantings. His research did point out, because he said, I did late plantings too, trying to put this on a late planting, response was minimal. So really it's about timing and on the early side to maximize the whole system that you have that year. And again, he kept talking about systems and systems. So yes, as you do build a bigger canopy, a thicker canopy, trying to keep those leaves productive down in the canopy becomes essential. The plant knows if it's not adding to it, it's basically going to disassociate itself with it. It's going to cut it off and it's going to fall to the ground early. So you don't have that producing carbohydrates and sugars, etc., to build that yield. So this is where a fungicide comes into play to help you out with holding on to those lower leaves. So all these little small pieces of management production are necessary. So with that, if you got more questions on it, feel free to reach out to any of us agronomists at Country Visions. We're here to help. We'd love to talk to you on this strategy as well as others. With that, stay warm, be safe. Spring is only 6 weeks away. Talk to you soon.